Just foreshadowing a bit. That's fine. Okay. Alrighty, so Tom's here, and Tom says we gotta get going so he can leave because Tom doesn't want to be here till 10 p.m. So
neither does Cody.
I really don't know. I like sleeping. More importantly, food. Food comes next for Cody. So we're going to start off with election stuff. So last week we called for any applicants, anyone who wanted to be an officer. First thing I want to say to the candidates, there's a bunch of you. There's 8 candidates. No matter the outcome of this, please make sure you're still involved next year. You're still going to be a leader of this club and still can help define how this club looks and how this club runs next year, right? It's a student-led club. It's yours to make as good as you possibly can. All right, so now I'm going to give each candidate a little tiny bit of time to say, hi, this is me, and anything else you want to say so everyone else knows who you are. So we'll just go down the list. Here's the list of the 8 candidates. Mike, if you want to say anything. I don't care.
I'm just going to talk from right here.
Yep.
I'm Mike. A lot of you've met me at least once, you know me. I've been CCDC DefSec Club since it was first formed, and then before that when I was just still under Computer Club. Since like my freshman year, so 4 years now, going into master's school in the next year. Some goals for DefSec if I became an officer was want to organize things a little bit better, make sure we have documentation throughout so people know what they're doing and how they can do things in terms of lessons, right? I want to be able so that if you weren't able to make it to a meeting, right, you can follow along and do it yourself in the IA lab and work with it. And then also want to work on separate from that, make sure we have funding for events and everyone's represented appropriately.
Cool. Hi, I'm Peter. I'm going to be starting with master's classes next fall. Doesn't really matter if I get to be an officer or not. I'm still planning on being involved. Planning on helping Mike Cutshaw and Nick Muse set up the white team, set up the environments for mock competitions. Hopefully, put in place more frequent, more structured mental mocks. We had a few of those last semester. This semester I've been in RA. We have residence life meetings right after this meeting, so that's really annoying. But I'm not going to be in RA next year, so I'm not going to have to worry about that. Also, I hope to be able to stick around after meetings and help people if they have questions with whatever we have going on in the meeting, and maybe sit down and kind of one-on-one with people and talk them through checklists and kind of concepts for going through and securing systems. Again, I'll be around next year regardless.
All right, I'm Nick. You all know me. I've been an officer this past year. Basically, going forward, it's mostly the same. Doing a lot with mock competitions. We've been talking, we want to do more variety of competitions like long form things like we get at Ice Age and Cyberforce. Just expanding that out, automating the process of building out these competitions, basically getting more depth and doing more of them hopefully. So yeah, that's going to be my main focus.
Hi, I'm Nick. Kind of my goals for being an officer is I'd like to help Nick and stuff like that get a more structured set up for trainings and things like that, and probably possibly bring in different various people that have specialties with certain Suricata or PFSense or people that are really good at Palo Alto, those kind of things. Another thing, one of my big goals for the next year would possibly be looking at getting industry sponsors or something like that, because our biggest competitor for national CCDC, UCF, just has sponsors. They just have loads of sponsors, and I think that we really need to, we could perhaps get those for our club within the next year. Other than that, I've attended every single meeting just about over the past year, and 2 years actually, and I'd love to see this club grow, so.
Hi, I'm Mike Cutshaw. You probably guys have seen me from the scenes doing white team a lot of the times, doing lectures over the last 2 years. Some cars have been involved. Kind of last year, over the course of this last year, I've kind of moved over to my more white team setup. I've been one of the people building your
Linux mock competition environments. You guys can thank me for all the fun you guys have had with some of those. Moving forward, it's going to be a fair amount of the same. Ideally, some new stuff. We want to introduce, as Nick said, new competitions. We want to automate all our setup. We want to get more docs. We want to get more stuff going. We're happy with what we have, but we always want to expand. And as an officer, I need to work with that and help us get there.
Hi, I'm Tristan. You guys have probably seen me around, just like everyone else too. If I were to be elected to an officer position, I would like to see more of the documentation type stuff going on throughout the week so people can continue. If you miss the meeting, you can still get the material from the meeting, and if you wanted to dive deeper in, there'd be more stuff to do there as well. I also am interested in automating a lot more of the white team aspects of stuff, because I've gotten a little more experience with that throughout some personal projects through this semester, and I think it would be really fun.
Hi, I'm Chase. This is going to be my third year here with DevSec. I've been around kind of since the beginning of the club as we know it. I've done a lot of competitions like Ice Age, mock competitions, the regional competitions, a lot of that kind of stuff. I've seen the club grow, change, develop a lot through the years, and I've seen how a lot of things have grown, how things have changed, and I'd like to bring sort of that knowledge of what we've been doing, how we've been growing, how we've been improving, and continuing to apply it as we go forward. I kind of share Nick's idea of the fact that we should reach out and try to get some corporate sponsors for the club. I think making our club, and as our university as a whole, more known kind of in the region, getting other companies and other sponsors more familiar with us is going to look very good for the school, our program, and the club in the long run. I think it'll open up a lot of opportunities for us as a club, make some things like planning events and travel easier if we have things like sponsors to back us up. So I'd like to see the kind of influence of the club grow a lot this year. So that's one of my big goals.
Hi, I'm Marianne. So I've only missed one DevSec meeting this year, and I've done every single mock. So this is the alternate for the CCDC team actually this year. And one goal I would like for next year is to have some either review sessions or preview sessions for freshmen or maybe people that aren't familiar with a topic we're doing at this week's meeting, so they can kind of come in with a better understanding, or if they come in and don't know what's going on, they can have that review session and go and better understand it and ask questions maybe they were too afraid to ask during the meeting. And if there's any sort of paperwork that has to be done, I'm more than willing to do it.
So those are your 8 candidates. There are 3 officer positions. Voting will start right now and close at 9 o'clock tonight. And very shortly after, we'll announce the results in the DevSec channel on Slack, so you'll all be aware of that. The link is at the bottom here, link.devsec.club/election. I ask you to provide your email, not so I can know exactly who you voted for, but just so that we're kind of tracking that you are only voting once. I don't want to rig this in any way. So again, choose up to 3 candidates. You can choose fewer than 3 if you want to, but only up to 3. Give you a minute or so to at least copy down this link, but then we'll get the mixed teams up here to give their debrief and move on with the meeting.
I'm gonna do overview, and then if you guys want to come up and talk, if like whatever you want to do, you don't have to come up if you guys don't want to, basically. You right if I just start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I'll fill in.
So this is going to be the mixed cybersecurity debrief from this weekend, basically to avoid 20 people rushing the stage. Oh, sorry. Here. Okay, so to avoid like 20 people rushing the stage, I'm gonna give an overview, and then if you want to come up and talk about your bit, you're more than welcome to do so, but you don't have to if you don't want to. So for this was in Fargo, North Dakota, on the 5th and 6th this past weekend. Basically, the competition was bracketed, single elimination, so it was attack versus defend. A coin toss determined who would attack and who would defend. So in each round, one team would attack the other. Our scripts could be staged online, but there was only one internet-connected system in the environment, and that was not connected to the rest of the network. So instead, you had to copy from your internet machine to a flash drive and then onto the competition network. Then there was a 15-minute grace period before red team could attack. So that gave you a little bit of time to download all your stuff, move it onto the flash drive, move it actually into the environment, move it to wherever else it needed to go inside the environment, and deploy that. Blue team was also allowed to attack red team if they wanted, which was a little bit of an interesting thing, sort of like cyber conquest. And basically the competition ran late into the night on Friday. I put 1 a.m. here, but I think it was close to like 2:30, right? 2:40. 2:45, okay. And then we finish it up basically Saturday morning-ish into Saturday afternoon the next day. So this is the bracket. We had Graceland University, Buena Vista, a couple DSU teams, Bismarck State from North Dakota, University of Nebraska Kearney, Minot State, and St. Cloud State. So these were basically a bunch of teams from colleges and universities around the region. There were, I think, like 2 maybe from North Dakota, a couple from Iowa, a couple from Minnesota, and Nebraska. I probably miscounted there, but yeah. So the competition environment looked like this. We had one Metasploitable 2 system that was running just basically a whole host of services. It was running HTTP, FTP, Postgres, SSH, SMTP, and VNC as scored services. So basically you just had to get on there and secure all those things as quickly as you could. There are also 5 Windows 8.1 workstations which were being scored via ping. Mostly those were just there for you to administer that one Metasploitable system. And then they had Ubuntu Mate Internet Machine, which you use to connect and like download all your scripts and everything. And 1 flash drive and an excessively warm room. So yeah, the competition room was like super hot. I remember we were sitting in the, like all our blue teamers on our first team were sitting out in the, basically the common area for all the teams, and we see all our team members come back with like flushed faces, sweating from the first round. Yeah.
Is like actually just the temperature.
So the results, DSU came first and second. There's a couple of nice memes on the side there. We got 9 cat, and then Kyle was playing Crab Rave during the first round, I think. So yeah. So from here, if anybody wants to come up and talk about their experience a little bit, if you want to do that.
Yeah, sure. I'll talk about it just a little bit. So while we can compare this to Cyber Conquest all we want, it was not Cyber Conquest. This is sort of like a last-minute add-on to the conference. I can't give it really great review or anything. There was 5 people to defend 1 Metasploitable 2 box. The guy who put all the infrastructure together said he created it 3 days before. So if that gives you an idea of how this was run. DSU really crushed it. We had a lot of stuff prepared. Or we prepared while waiting for other competitions to end. We started 3 hours late. Yeah, so the actual environment, they messed with the Windows 8 boxes, such as like the screen resolution was locked at 800 by 600. Other random accounts on there that you had to secure. All of the Windows narration and accessibility options were enabled to be annoying. They also, gave Blue Team 50 start. Only 1 machine to download scripts from. Definitely put the advantage on the Blue Team. DSU red teamed every round for both teams except for the last round when both DSU teams were able to blue team and red team simultaneously.
DSU sucks at coin tosses.
Oh yeah, we lost almost every coin toss. Yeah.
We won the very last one.
So we won 1 coin toss of the 4.
And that was against the other DSU team.
Yeah. So.
There wasn't much thought in the competition put into
Yeah.
making it fair from both sides. It was just mainly done under the assumption that red team is red team, so they're going to be overpowered. Let's try to give blue team a shot. And what ended up happening is it was kind of the opposite. But I'd like to say that DSU put enough work in beforehand, scraps of information we had to be a highly effective red team at the disadvantage we were. And because of that, every team came out on top.
Yeah, the fact that everyone here the freshman year gets to explore and look at Metasploitable 2 and how to actually attack boxes definitely, I think, helped everyone in the competition knowing how to exploit boxes and what services are running for Metasploitable to secure those. In fact, we could use the IA lab then afterward to spin up the whole environment actually if we wanted to. Just because we had that resource available to us was really helpful. One last thing to note here is they didn't mention this anywhere except at the very end, was first place actually got $250 and second place got $150 for a total of $400. So that was $500. But anyway, so DSU won both those. DSU gets all of that. Yeah.
Cool. So, couple fun things. I kind of went through those. So, a couple fun things. Bailey had some fun installing some wonderful software on other people's computers.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think Nick came up with the idea of what about Halo? So we decided that we were at round 2 for red team, and we were at a point where basically we had already counted their Metasploitable 2 twice, and like they had it like basically taken offline, so we couldn't really just do anything because it was impossible for us to get into the Windows machines. So we were just like, let's just download Halo, and we had a big Halo LAN party basically. So, and we came out on top still. It was all their services were pretty much down.
So, and the other thing I was going to say is it was really cool to see how well DSU did, especially compared to the other teams, and how good of infrastructure we have here compared to them. Because they had like 6 computers for red team, 6 computers for blue team that were actual physical desktops. There was like a really long wait between each of the rounds because they had to like physically re-image every single one of them. And then they had just like another computer that was just a desktop running ESXi, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like the fact that we have the iLab is pretty stinking cool. And one of the people who was a student there and who was organizing that said he was going to transfer to DSU, and he meant it. So I don't know, just a renewed
Yeah, I mean-
appreciation for this school versus like any other school in the U.S.
Yeah, it made me appreciate DSU like an insane amount more. Like, I mean, I already love DSU anyway, but like, I was like, wow, we are really blessed with everything we got.
You kind of take it for granted until you see
Yeah.
what it's like when you don't have it.
Yeah.
And especially yeah, especially like Nick and Michael setting up the environments too, because like with the amount of time that NDSU had to set it up, like you two could have set up a way like more amazing competition. And granted, have more resources, but also like thank you to you two for doing all the cool stuff that you do. Cool. That's all I got.
I was gonna say at the end there, I got a chance to talk with one of the guys who actually created the environment and was running it most of the time. And we actually ended up exchanging emails. He said that they actually have a security club at their campus as well, which is what this was kind of birthed from, where they got some volunteers from. And they said they're about 100 strong. So one of their hugest problems is just having content, and they don't have like access to an iLab or anything, or infrastructure-wise, right? Because you know, the big part of our presentations is being able to have the technical part of it to go through together. I offered to share some of our stuff, like some of our presentations that we've done in the past and stuff. Obviously, they don't have our audio lab, but and then we kind of started talking about doing more collaboration in the future. Our mock competitions, honestly, are to the point they're almost as good as regionals, and you know, building new competitions like Cyber Conquest. It's been a very realistic possibility of inviting regional schools to come down for a weekend and actually making it a thing. And that was something they were super interested in to get some hands-on experience. So I think in the future we'll be seeing a lot more of them, and hopefully other regional schools as well.
Yeah, just to add on to that fact that they were very interested and open to wanting to come down to DSU and compete in some of the competitions we put on here locally for the school. That we can get some other schools interested in coming down too on the weekend, like Jacob was saying. They're very open to that, which was refreshing to hear, because I know we've been really hesitant on doing that, but hopefully next year we can get that going a lot more. Other things I learned, installing Metasploit on Windows to attack from is awful, and I don't recommend anyone ever do it because it just breaks a lot. You can hack from Windows using like PuTTY and Netcat, which isn't terrible, but it's not great. And
Neither of those things are installed by default.
no, neither of them are installed by default either. Networking is magic. We installed actually VMware Workstation Pro and Kali images downloaded for us to boot from, and some people were able to get their Kalis connected to the internal network there. Some of us weren't so lucky. We just couldn't figure out why. So again, networking is magic. I need to learn more. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we kind of did a similar thing for Team 2 when we were writing. We used Kali images to have a Kali. Mine actually broke round 1. I have the worst luck when it comes to installing Kalis. So basically, I was just sitting there doxing the crap out of their ESXi. Just failed admin account attempt, like login attempt after. I just kept kicking them out to the point where they came in and was like, "Can you stop doing that? That'd be great." So I gotta just find something if you get stuck to do.
And if you want to look at any of the scripts we built / the repository we put together for the competition, it's all hosted on dsvu.host. Publicly accessible and open. Please don't destroy my web server.
I could make that repo meeting public too if you wanted.
It's all up there. So dsvu.host, which will probably end up being made into a repo. Cool.
I really enjoyed being a red team for this competition, and, in the sense that I'm so used to red teaming at mock competitions where I have from Ubuntu and I have everything set up and customized and it's nice. And so to come to a competition and have to kind of dive back into the raw skills of like, we're going to use these basic tools instead of just this massive Python script or these sets of like bash scripts that I've written to automate everything. It was kind of neat to have to do that again, so I enjoyed that.
There's nothing else. We're gonna cover a little bit of the scripts that Cutshaw and Peter and I wrote. Like, basically after the first round, once we saw the environment, we had about like 3 or 4 hours to actually start scripting stuff out. And we're just gonna try to like walk you through our process here. So securing Metasploitable 2. So we started with the basics. These are things we wrote before the competition started, before we had any idea what the environment would look like. So we just basically started with our Linux checklist and automated everything in there. So changing passwords, locking down Etsy sudoers, doing our IP tables firewall, disabling public key authentication from SSH. Then wrote some scripts to try to like restore Etsy profile, bash RC and profile if they ever got broken. So you can sort of just like copy those from Etsy Scale or like user share base files on Ubuntu. Then we did some magic to get rid of nasty PAM modules with sed. So I know like some people from Team 2 were talking about this too, but Tristan brought this up in one of our like pre-planning meetings, was that at Ice Age they inserted this like malicious PAM config where they replaced, I think it's PAM root OK, which is a PAM module that lets root do whatever it wants. If you're already root, then you can like change users' passwords without having to type in your own password. So they replaced that line in the config with sufficient PAM permit. So that basically let anyone do that thing. So like anyone could change anybody's password, or you could set it in there so that like anybody can just log in without having to authenticate, things like that. So you can do some sed magic to just like strip out those lines. So you're just looking like for sufficient .star PAM permit.so. Then we also talked a little bit about Pam Exec. So Pam Exec is this really weird, probably shouldn't be there PAM module that lets you execute arbitrary scripts. So you can just put it into a config and set it as like an optional thing. And whenever someone like tries to log in, they'll just run that script just every single time, whether they can authenticate or not. So that's like an easy way to actually just like steal user passwords, is that you can set that up to like pull in, I think it's like expose tokens, I think is the config, and it'll like just stick, it'll just pass the user's username and password to your script as like the first argument, which is pretty interesting. And then obviously disabling PHP shell functions, so just like automatically going into PHP.ini, just disabling all of the different functions you can use to open a shell. And then killing all SSH connections, that was something we never actually used, but basically the idea there is that if somebody's already logged into your system, if we didn't have that 15-minute grace period, you just expect red team to already be on there. So this would just like cut off, just kill all the processes that are running SSH from a remote system. And securing services, which will be the next section. I don't know, you want to talk a little bit about these?
Yeah, so, and that's the funny thing is that Blue Team has this massive advantage because we can script and we can do things, and at that point we already know what the environment was. So with that 15 minutes, we can run a single script that can secure everything. But for teams that didn't have that didn't take the time to research what's wrong with Metasploitable, Red Team still had a pretty decent advantage in that respect because it's a Metasploitable box. It's supposed to be hacked. It's made to be incredibly, incredibly vulnerable. And almost any service has a way to gain some level of code execution, and which would let them nuke the box. So starting at the top with kind of the Apache, we had a PHP exploit that would essentially allow you to, even if there's no content on the web page, get a PHP shell as www data. So you can get an unprivileged shell as anybody, and then you can use privesc. That was actually our intended method for the last round for getting into Team 2 stuff. Didn't actually have to do that, but that was what we planned to do. VSFTP, they had version 2.3.4, which if you don't know what that does, that has a backdoor built into it, which I don't know if people know exactly how that came about. But the point is, you put a smiley face in your username, and it will open up a telnet session on port 63 or 6200, I believe, that will allow you to log in and do whatever you want. So there's the code execution there. That's simple enough. We just blocked that with firewalls. The PHP, I believe we blocked by upgrading upgrading PHP, which normally wouldn't be that hard, but as you remember, we had no internet in this environment, so we had to do essentially export a deb package and move that over, and that's how we did that one. For the web applications that were actually running, I believe we had first of all, we had DVWA, the damn vulnerable web app, and then I believe we had 3-4 others that basically did exactly the same thing. We had Tiki.
Yeah, TikiWiki, PHPMyAdmin, was that DVA or something?
I think they had they had another vulnerable web app. I don't know if it's just an older version or not. And I think they had 2 TikiWiki things too.
They had 3 of them.
So basically, you just had all the vulnerable web applications. Each one has its own ways to gain code execution. I think we basically ended up just disabling a vast majority of those.
Yeah, we disabled all but 2 except for PHPMyAdmin and DVWA.
And PHPMyAdmin, we just secured the MySQL password on that, and the DVWA, we did the same thing. And then I think you moved into impossible mode, or did you just leave it?
I just left it.
Okay, yeah.
If you can't log into DVWA, you
yeah.
can't do anything.
And that's the funny thing is that's the one secure part of DVWA is the login page. So as long as we keep you out of there. Postfix, that was our SMTP mail server. It had a theoretical vulnerability. It had a CVE associated with it for code execution, but there wasn't a Metasploit module. So we patched it anyway, same process. We had to move the deb over manually and then patch it up from that. Probably wouldn't have got anything, but we figured better safe than sorry. Apache, once again, allowed DOS. Nobody took advantage of that, and that's kind of, we would have had to upgrade Apache. We probably could have followed the same process. Probably a much greater chance of breaking stuff, so it was less of a concern for sure. NFS, by default, Metasploitable. There's no authentication built into NFS, and unfortunately, that's not really something you can change. To put authentication on NFS, you have to set up Kerberos, which is a long and arduous process. And by default, theirs was set to read and write as the root user account for the entire file system. I mean, you can modify any file in the system. There's no authentication whatsoever. My script made a new directory, made that into the NFS file share, basically turned you an unprivileged user account and restricted write access. So we lock you in a box and hope you don't do anything. You can't do anything too bad in that box. Plus, there was no write access, so there wasn't too much you could do. The kernel was vulnerable to dirty cow. I don't know if there was too much.
Did you guys actually end up using that?
No.
Yeah. And that was one of the things is there was a lot of these vulnerabilities. Most of them didn't need to be used. Did I get Postgres isn't up there? So PostgreSQL also had another one. If you were able to authenticate as any user account of PostgreSQL, I believe you could do code execution. So once again, not normally something you'd expect out of a database. And then everything was default passwords. VNC was default passwords. SSH was default passwords. FTP actually had anonymous access and so on.
So so offline patching, we just basically downloaded deb packages using a Metasploitable VM in the II lab. So something you have to fix your app sources.list before you do it because Metasploitable still uses the old Ubuntu repos.